Welcome to Custom Homebuilders Solutions, a web-based software, also known as CHS, a standalone accounting suite focused on job costing and profit management for professional home builders.
Hi again. I am continuing the videos about setting up vendors, people that you pay checks to, or you use a debit card and pay them, or you use a credit card and pay them, but everybody, entities that you pay bills to. I'm going to click Vendors Setup. We're going to continue. This is a continuation of videos about setting up vendors. We already talked about what are vendors, but you can click this to review that again. This what are vendors. But I'm going to click the vendors list and setup. The very first vendors I'm going to talk about are ones that don't have to do with being trade contractors or suppliers for jobs, so that I can quickly demonstrate the defaults that you can set up for the vendors that will drop in automatically when you're doing payables bills. That's what this video is about. It's going to be the section about the defaults. So first of all, I'm going to just select a general overhead type person that we pay, like AT&T for our phone bill. And I'll click the pencil edit icon to open AT&T to see the window we've been looking at. Now we've been looking at vendors that are set up as trade contractors, etc. We talked about how you fill in all of these fields over for the basic vendor info. Then our next videos were about the 1099 info. Now in the case of AT&T, that we don't pay for trades or services, plus they're a big corporation, etc. We don't send them a 1099, so we left the default that dropped in here of none. But the section I'll be talking about is this one that says defaults to drop in when entering bills or POs. What that means is when you start entering a bill, things that you select here in this section will drop in to the fields so that you don't have to select them again. So the first thing we're going to talk about is what's called GL account. And what that means is that it's an account that is set up on your chart of accounts, and that it will be supplied as the default chart of accounts number when you start entering a bill. It's used in accounting records to determine where it will be displayed in your accounting books and on financial statements. So choose the account that will be most often used for posting invoices for this vendor. So I've already done that so that we don't take a lot of time, but I chose the GL account from my chart of accounts for telephone expense, right? So that's where I'd like it to show up when I do income statements or when I do general ledgers. I want it to show up under telephone expense. So that's the GL account I chose for this. Now what you need to do about these GL accounts and when you're setting up vendors is please talk to your accountant if you're not the accountant and have them help you set up these default GL accounts. It's very useful to set them up here. Now when you enter a bill and for some reason you're paying this vendor for something else, you can change the GL account that drops in. The department that you select will also drop into the bill, and in CHS you can set up various departments or divisions that you want certain bills to be posted to. We have an overhead department that we supply to you, and we have a custom homes department that we supply, but you can set up as many departments, and you should look at your setup steps and the area under accounting for setting up departments for more information. But there is a question mark button here, and it talks about selecting a default department to drop in, so that if you print an income statement just for overhead, or you just want to look at general ledger just for overhead department, that kind of thing, that bill will have been posted to the OH department. And again, it can be changed when you're entering the bill. For AT&T, we will not select a cost code and leave a zero cost code, meaning that it's not for a job cost, a zero cost code. We're going to come back and do a trade contractor in a minute and talk about that. But another very handy thing to do is to go ahead and enter a default description for payables bills. So in here, I've entered AT&T-office phone bill. That is a description when you're doing general ledgers, etc. You will see a description about the bill, various other places you'd like to actually see what the bill is for. after you do these selections, you would save it, which I've already done, and then close it. What I want to do is demonstrate something about entering the bill, but first I'll just show you real quick, maybe another one. Bank of America that we have set up is set up because they charge us service charges that comes through as a debit, but we filled in a GL account of bank service charges and a department of overhead and a default description of Bank of America service charges. And you also enter debits on the screen for entering payables bills and then just post them as paid instead of leaving them there to print a check for, and that's how you get debits into payables and CHS. But I'll close this. I want to go back to the Home tab and demonstrate under Post New Payables and Charges, posting a new bill from scratch for overhead vendors. So let's select that AT&T one that we were looking at as the vendor that we're going to pay a bill to. Now this won't be a job related or job cost bill, so I'm going to use the quick bill button real quick. I'm not going to enter a bill, I just wanted to show you a few things. Notice that the OH department dropped in because of this vendor's defaults. Also notice that the default GL for telephone dropped in, and that the default description AT&T office bill dropped in, so I don't need to type any of those. Basically, to enter this bill, I might select the date of the bill. Maybe it came a little earlier, it's dated that. And since things like AT&T don't even have invoice numbers, I might put in 10 digits for the date as an invoice number. So all I've had to do is do the date, the invoice number, and then whatever the bill is for, the amount that the bill is for, and then submit it and post it to be on an unpaids list, or post it as already paid because it was a debit from the account. But that's a whole other set of videos about doing payables. But I wanted to show you how little I have to type in because I did set up those defaults for AT&T. I'm going to close this and not submit it, and if we select Bank of America that I showed you and I do a quick bill, then all I'd have to do is select the date of the bill, or the date they did the debit, which might have been the end of last month, the debit, and maybe 6 digits for the date, and then I'd put in, maybe they charge us $5. Then I could just submit that and post it as paid, and that's how it gets taken out of the checking account that you select when you post it as paid. But see how quickly having all of these defaults drop in, the description, the GL account number for bank service charges, and the department. I don't have to select any of those. So let's close, do not submit, and we'll leave this open here just so it's quick to get back to. So let's talk about the trade contractors now. And I think what I'm going to use is a Big Buck. It's called Big Buck Construction. It's kind of a funny name, but I'll use the pencil edit icon to go to their setup window to talk about the rest of the things under the defaults to drop in. First of all, this account number 1430 comes from the NAHB default chart of accounts that you might have loaded or you might not have loaded, and it's an account that's in work in progress. Most of your trade contractors, your suppliers, anybody you're paying for the hard costs out on a job that you want to have show up on a job cost report for the job will have the very same GL number. So Big Buck has that. Maybe Bob Jones Roofing would have the same GL account number, because all of that's being posted to the GL account 1430. When you enter a bill, you're selecting jobs so that CHS can just look at this GL account on your chart of accounts for general ledgers for job cost reports and just get the part for that job. So usually most builders are using an account on their work in progress, but you need to discuss this with your accountant and your tax accountant about where you will be posting bills for various job costs using your own particular accounting method, whether you're on completed contract or maybe it's all remodeling, so you're just posting it all to a GL account for cost of sales, etc. That's your choice. Discuss this, but it's nice to put in what the default GL account should be for this trade contractor. Now this trade contractor we like to post, because we're a custom home builder, we like to post most of his bills to our custom homes department rather than to the overhead department, so we selected that. Now the other thing that for trade contractors or suppliers or anybody you'll be paying for job costs is that you can select a default cost code. Please watch our videos about setting up your cost codes and your cost centers in CHS. Once you set up those cost codes, they will be available here in this drop-down list. Now for this trade contractor, we selected, he actually does foundations, etc. So we selected a default cost code of 2105 to drop in when we're entering a new bill. Since that dropped in when we enter a new bill, if we're paying them for something else like excavation or shoring or some of these other things in that area, probably, other things like flat work or underpinning probably, you can select a different cost code when you're entering the bill. It's just that you want maybe the most common one that might be in the area close to other ones that you might be selecting to be your default. If you click this question mark button, you'll see basically what I've been talking about here. But it does mention that you can assign other cost codes to the vendor other than just that one that's the default for payables. And I'm also going to show you how that's used. But if you click this button click this link to assign other cost codes to the vendor, I can add a new record for big buck. Maybe I'll start typing 2-1 so I see those. And maybe I want to give them also a fill, add them to be part of the fill. Oh, I already have that one, so let's choose another one. Maybe underpinning. We'll just add that cost code, say that big buck. So in case we're doing bids for underpinning example, I'm going to show you that in a minute, but big buck would show up for bids for underpinning. Big buck will show up for bids for slab contract, that type of thing. So that's what this is about, assigning other cost codes to this vendor. You can assign as many as you like. And that's what that link is for. I'll show you how that's used while we're on that subject. So let's go ahead and close this. It's already been done. You might have put a default description of big buck. I had big buck hyphen, but you could have put big buck hyphen, slab draw or something so that that always drops in when you enter a new bill. What I'd like to do real quick is go to the main menu. A very active window that people have open most of the time up in their tab across here is something called a jobs dashboard. I'm going to select just some job that we use a lot for our demo. And there's all kinds of things that will come in to go do for this job. But what I'd like to show you is this vendor bids list. I mentioned assigning cost codes to that vendor means that if you look at this open list of vendors to use for requesting bids, you're going to see that it's all grouped by cost centers, and you're going to see under that 2105, Big Buck is showing up here as one of the vendors. Big Buck's also showing up under as one of the vendors for flat work, and so if you're going to request a bid and post a new bid or set up bids, you'll be using lists like this that show what vendors go with whatever cost center you're working on. So in slab contract it would be this. You can assign additional cost codes from here to a vendor, but of course you need to select the vendor first, like Big Buck or somebody, and then select a cost code to assign to them, another cost code to assign to them. So if I did Big Buck, and I start typing 2-1 to get to the area of his stuff, maybe I haven't assigned him to gravel yet, so I'll submit that. Went down to the 2105s, 2100s, fill, concrete. Under gravel now we have Big Buck as being the vendor to use for our gravel cost center. So that's what all of that assigning cost codes to vendors is all about. We'll probably talk more about that in videos about actual bid requests and doing budgets, etc. But I like to show how those come into play based on how you're setting up the vendor. So let's go back and create a payables bill, a job cost payables bill for Big Buck. So we would do this create job related now, not just a quick bill for overhead. Well, first of all, we're warned that the workers' comp is required and has expired, but that's in our next video about vendors, and so we'll ignore that for right now. But notice that the cost code 2105 that I selected as his default dropped in, but I could drop down and select some other one for entering this bill. Also, if I select that job we use a lot right here, I wanted to let you know that when you set up jobs, you can set up a default general ledger number that will override what it will suddenly say. This was a remodeling job. I don't know if I set up any that are sort of, this is a rental property. So I selected the rental property and suddenly noticed that the GL number got changed because attached to that job I said use this GL number. And that's on the job setup window. We won't go look at all of that, but when you set up a job you can say what default GL number do I want to use for that job. So it would basically, once you select a job, overwrite what dropped in originally for the vendor of the 1430. If I go back to Smith, which is a custom home job, and I'm probably always paying him for labor, it'll be the 1430 because that's what I assigned to the Smith job also. But it was already there for the vendor, and then based on the job I select it might change. And the job will also cause the department to change. Like when I did that PM one, you'll notice that the department changes to PM. So even though CHS originally came in, there's other things that you can change as you do it. Let's get back to that Smith, just so we have a regular job cost one going on here. And whatever invoice number they gave us for a bill they may have sent us, then you can type in, like I said, if you, my default description that I put over there on the vendor setup was big buck hyphen, but if you wanted to, you could do big buck hyphen slab draw, because that's what you always pay them for, but at least the big buck part is started. I would type in the amount for the bill, and then I would submit it. I just wanted to talk about these defaults, the GL number, the department number, and the cost code that drops in. And the type will actually drop in based on what type, what cost code type you have assigned to that cost code. You may have assigned labor to it or materials to it, and that will have dropped in, but you can change it. If for some reason you know that what you're paying for is just materials, you can do that. Anyway, that really all comes in more with setting up cost codes and their defaults. But all sorts of defaults come in, but some, what I wanted to demonstrate, come in for the vendor as you enter bills. And that's what those fields are all about over there. So let's close this. Let's close this. See if we want to see anything else. Let me just double check that big buck and make sure I talked about everything. Again, look, this is the 1430 dropped in when I started a new bill. The CH department for custom homes dropped in, and 2105 dropped in because that's what I set up for this vendor. The only thing that will cause a different default to be there is if you select a job that has some different defaults for it. And we talked about setting up additional cost codes for the vendors and the default description, and you saw the big buck hyphen come in. Now before I leave this video, you can use vendor notes to type anything that you like. It's just a general information thing that you can look at, and if you click, sometimes you can see notes in other areas. The notes that you wrote, you might, who knows what you want to say, we pay him for slab, or I like to talk to Glenn, or whatever. It's just general overall notes for the vendor that you can type in anything you like. You don't need to be putting a bunch of other contact information in, usually, because like I explained on a previous video, you can see that we've set up 3 other contacts besides the main Glenn Thomas here, and you'll be able to look at those when you're entering things or doing things elsewhere in CHS. Okay, that's it for this section. We're going to come back and talk about setting up payment terms for vendors that do provide us a payment discount of some sort, also for what day their bills are usually due, and we will discuss that in the very next video. And thank you for watching.